The summer heat on Horn Island was already brutal by the time the boats arrived on July 4th, 2026. Hundreds of people, music, coolers, the kind of day that feels invincible. And then, sometime that afternoon, 18-year-old Nolan Wells vanished.
About him. So remember what we're talking about here. 18-year-old Nolan Wells, right? From Ocean Springs, Mississippi, was a college student, football player. July 4th weekend, he went with a group of friends to Horn Island, this barrier island off the Mississippi coast. It's remote, right? It's no commercial development there. You can only access it through a boat. And at some point, he disappeared. He was reported missing that night. A massive search was launched. And 2 days later, on July 6th, his body was found on the island. But what happened to him remains a question that no one seems to be able to answer, at least.
First, his friends left the island without him, and the explanations for why that happened have shifted more than once. Second, an independent autopsy came back inconclusive, but not before revealing something on the back of Nolan's head that two different forensic experts are interpreting in two completely different ways. Third, a preservation notice has now been sent to multiple individuals, including the son of a sitting judge, signaling that a civil lawsuit may be imminent. And whatever that lawsuit uncovers could change everything we think we know about that day. Fourth, at least one person in this case has received credible death threats now under FBI investigation, not because of anything proven in a courtroom, but because of what was said online. This video is about separating what is documented, verified, and on the record from what has been amplified, repeated, and treated as fact when it is not. Because in this case, those two categories have drifted very far apart. Nolan Wells was 18 years old, a college student, a football player from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. On the 4th of July weekend, he traveled with a group of friends to Horn Island. Horn Island is a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. No commercial development, no roads in, accessible only by boat. It was a holiday gathering. Hundreds of people were out there that day. At some point during the afternoon, Nolan was not on any of the boats heading back. He was reported missing that night. A search was launched. 2 days later, on July 6th, his body was found on the island. Those are the documented facts of the beginning of this case. What happened between the moment he was last seen and the moment that search began is where the documented record ends and the speculation begins.
The results of the family's independent autopsy listed Nolan's cause and manner of death as undetermined. We'll talk about it a little bit more. We're awaiting the results from the official state medical examiner as well, including toxicology reports. The family is conducting their own investigation, led by civil rights attorney Ben Crump. And now we have more developments since we last talked about, and that's one of them.
And it is worth sitting with that boundary for a moment, because the distance between what we actually know and what is being stated as established online is significant. One of the most repeated claims circulating about this case involves the friends who were with Nolan that day, specifically the suggestion that their behavior on and after the island was suspicious, evasive, or worse. Here is what is documented. Nolan's father reported that one friend was indifferent when asked to return Nolan's belongings, including his keys. Nolan's mother called his phone repeatedly after he went missing, and according to attorney Ben Crump, there was no answer. These details are real. They are verified. They are also, on their own, not evidence of foul play. The phone was on the boat. Nolan had not taken it into the water with him, which is entirely ordinary. Whether anyone heard it ring, whether it was on silent, whether someone simply did not realize it was ringing, none of that has been established.
And if one boat is leaving and taking on water, you can easily say, well, I'll just go on another boat.
Let's talk about the phone for a second. So Ben Crump, again, he was on with Cuomo, talked about the phone. So there's a whole lot of talk out there about whether Nolan reportedly left his phone behind, why did he do it, whether any data was deleted from it. Now, Nolan's purported friend Warren Hudson told Brandon Tatum on this YouTube show, there was no reason for us to get on Nolan's phone. No one touched Nolan's phone. If none of us had touched Nolan's phone, then, there's no reason for anything to be deleted. Ben Crump said to Cuomo last night, quote, his mother called his phone repeatedly with no answer. That raises questions. That's all we want to get to.
Ben Crump, who is representing the family, acknowledged this openly. He said, and this is worth quoting carefully, that the mother called with no answer, and that raises questions. He did not say it proves anything. That distinction matters.
Possibly. And I know Ben Crump, he's an honorable person, And I understand why the family and Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton are concerned about the lack of transparency. But the fact that no one picked up the phone is not in itself evidence of foul play. That phone was apparently on the boat without Nolan, and it could have rang, it could have been on silent mode, and people may have not have known that the phone was ringing. And also, we don't know the facts. Like, the family had said that Nolan's videos and pictures were missing, and that is suspicious, but there's no proof of that. We don't know.
Here is one of the places where myth has clearly outpaced the documented record, and it is worth naming directly. Multiple online commentators have identified specific individuals as suspects, stated definitively that evidence was destroyed, and claimed to know what happened on that island. None of those claims are supported by any documented evidence that has been made public. The independent autopsy, conducted by a pathologist hired by the family, returned a finding of undetermined cause and manner of death, not homicide, not ruled out, undetermined. That pathologist, by multiple accounts from legal and forensic observers, did exactly what a rigorous independent examiner should do. He did not deliver a preordained conclusion. He said the evidence did not support a definitive finding. That is professional integrity, not a cover-up. The pattern here is one we see in high-profile cases repeatedly. A finding of undetermined becomes, in online spaces, proof of concealment. Absence of a named suspect becomes evidence that authorities are protecting someone. Measured language from attorneys and examiners gets stripped of its qualifications and repeated as certainty. This is how myth gets built. And in this case, real people are paying a real price for it.
Lady, and that is the point. Edmondson is legally fighting those he claims are spreading misinformation about him. In fact, in a statement to Law and Crime, I'm going to read this to you. It says, quote, "After a week of egregiously false and defamatory accusations against Bart Edmondson Jr., accusations which resulted in credible death threats now being investigated by the FBI, the Edmondson family has released a statement addressing their son's knowledge of and cooperation in the Nolan Wells investigation. Please see the attached statement as well as a cease and desist evidence preservation notice sent today to an online influencer in anticipation of defamation litigation against her. My law office is representing..."
Bart Edmondson Jr. was on Horn Island that day. He piloted his own boat out and his own boat home. According to a detailed statement released by his family, when a nearby vessel suffered a mechanical malfunction that afternoon, Edmondson boarded the distressed boat, removed its transom plug, returned to his own vessel, and towed the other boat briefly to allow accumulated water to drain. His family states more than 20 passengers across the two boats witnessed this. When Nolan's disappearance came to light, Edmondson cooperated fully with law enforcement. He gave interviews. He answered questions. He allowed his phone to be reviewed. He permitted inspection of his boat and its GPS device. He compiled a list of potential witnesses and shared it with investigators. At no point has he been identified as a suspect.
Threats. It says, quote, "The Edmondson family expresses its sincere condolences to the family of Nolan Wells for their tragic loss. Recent targeted attacks on our son, Bart Jr., now make our silence impossible. Hundreds of Mississippi Gulf Coast residents journeyed out to Horn Island to celebrate the holiday on the 4th of July. Home from college, Bart Jr. was among them. He piloted his own boat to Horn Island and piloted his own boat home. When a nearby boat suffered a mechanical malfunction on the afternoon of the 4th, which is what we were just talking about before, Bart Jr. gave advice and direct aid to the distressed vessel. As part of this, he boarded the distressed vessel, removed its transom plug, got back onto his boat, and towed the distressed vessel for a short distance. These actions allowed water that had accumulated on the distressed vessel to drain. Bart Jr. believes that more than 20 passengers were spread across the two boats to witness these events." Goes on to say, when Nolan's disappearance and death came to light, Bart Jr. freely and fully cooperated with law enforcement investigating the tragedy. He sat for interviews, answered all of the questions he was asked, and shared all of his recollection from July 4th, 2026. Bart Jr. also compiled a list of potential witnesses. Goes on to say he allowed his phone to be viewed and shared, requested photographs and videos from that day with law enforcement. He also permitted the inspection of his boat and GPS device. At no point in this process.
That did not stop what happened next. Online accounts identified Edmondson publicly, shared his home address, posted photographs of his residence, and accused him of causing or covering up Nolan's death.
Has Bart Jr. ever been identified as a suspect in Nolan's death? This has not stopped people from engaging in dangerous speculation, nor has it stopped outright fabrications. This week, it has been Bart Jr.'s turn to be accused by thousands of online strangers who do not know him, do not know any relevant facts, and do not care about our community or the truth of what happened. We have retained legal counsel for the purpose of pursuing recourse against those individuals fabricating lies about him or our family. The first cease and desist and spoliation letter is being issued today to an online user who originated many of the falsehoods against him.
The FBI is now investigating credible death threats made against him as a result.
If he really had something to do with this, if he had something to hide, I don't know if you'd be filing a lawsuit where all this could potentially get exposed.
That's the discovery process. You got to be careful, because if you file these lawsuits, then you open yourself up to discovery, depositions, document production. So the fact that they're taking initiative, again, tells me that I think they're being sincere and credible, and I don't believe.
His family has retained legal counsel and issued a cease and desist letter to at least one online user they allege originated many of the false claims.
Here, these plaintiffs are not public figures. These friends of Nolan Wells are not public figures. They will have an easier time winning a defamation lawsuit.
So if you're an online commentator and you're saying this person should be looked at, or there's some suspicious things about this person, like, where does it go from online speculation again into legal territory? Is it like you have to make a definitive false statement? That person's a killer. That person did that. I mean, where is it like, this person should be looked at? There's some questions surrounding this person. That's not actionable. I mean, where's, again, the line?
See, that's for a jury and a judge
Right.
to decide. But you do not get immunity for using words.
That letter is documented. It has been reported by Law and Crime and corroborated by the family's public statement. This is not a detail that gets much attention in typical coverage of this case, and it should, because what happened to Bart Edmondson Jr. is a documented consequence of what occurs when speculation is presented as fact to an emotionally activated audience. Here is a genuine question the documented record does not fully resolve, and it is worth sitting with. Multiple witnesses were present on that island, hundreds of people by most accounts, and yet there are no verified, publicly documented eyewitness accounts of what happened to Nolan in his final hours. No one has come forward publicly to say they saw violence. No one has come forward to say they saw him in distress. No video has surfaced showing anything conclusive. Now, it is possible that law enforcement has statements or footage they have not released because the investigation is ongoing. The district attorney has indicated the case may go before a grand jury before findings are made public. That is a normal part of how serious criminal investigations proceed, but the absence of public eyewitness accounts cuts both ways. It is used by some to suggest a coordinated silence, a cover-up involving multiple people. It is used by others to suggest that nothing visible occurred, that Nolan simply drowned in a moment no one witnessed. Which interpretation is more consistent with what we actually know? That is a genuine open question, and the comments on this video are a legitimate place to think through it, because the documented record does not resolve it. The legal picture in this case is moving quickly, and understanding the mechanics matters. Nolan's family, led by civil rights attorney Ben Crump, has filed subpoenas through a civil estate proceeding seeking records from TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Meta, and Life 360. Those subpoenas are seeking account information, subscriber data, IP addresses, communications, and photographs. A preservation notice has been sent to multiple parties, including the family of a judge whose son was reportedly present on the island.
People magazine, that a preservation notice, which you just mentioned, a notice to preserve evidence, was sent by Nolan's family to the families of Nolan's friends and different investigative bodies or agencies. And one letter that was obtained says, quote, accordingly, you have an immediate legal duty to preserve all materials of all kinds within your possession, custody, or control that may be relevant in any way to the claims or defenses. This duty includes not only you, but also your family members. And according to reporting from People in ABC News, one was even sent, for example, to Ashley Cole, who's a judge whose son was reportedly with Nolan Wells that day. It seems like they might be filing a lawsuit in
Preservation notices are not lawsuits. They are legal signals that litigation is being contemplated and that evidence must not be destroyed. Companies and individuals who receive them and then destroy relevant data face serious legal exposure if a lawsuit follows. The family's parallel track here is deliberate. They do not fully trust the pace of the state investigation. They are building a civil case that operates under a lower evidentiary standard than a criminal prosecution. You do not need to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt in a wrongful death action. You need to show it is more likely than not.
Capacity against who, and what would be the claims?
It could be a wrongful death action. Remember, when you prosecute someone for a murder or homicide, you need to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But if you are moving ahead with a lawsuit based on wrongful death or battery, you only need to prove it with a preponderance of the evidence. Is it more likely than not that it occurred?
Lower standard, yeah.
A lower standard, right? O.J. Simpson was found not guilty because the standard beyond a reasonable doubt was so high, but he was found liable for the deaths of Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman. Lower standard. So what the family's doing here is what they've already been doing with the independent autopsy. They don't necessarily trust what the government is doing, and so they're saying, we're going to do our own investigation, the independent autopsy, which was inconclusive, and we don't trust that there will be criminal charges filed, so we're going to do an investigation via lawsuit through private lawyers. That's where the preservation is.
That lower threshold is real, but it comes with its own complications. If civil depositions happen before criminal charges are filed, witnesses may say things that conflict with what they told investigators. Prosecutors are also sensitive to the appearance that a civil case is being used as leverage to pressure defendants toward settlement.
Yes, actually, it's a good point, because when you start doing interviews and it can conflict with the interviews of the state. The state's doing their own interviews. So now if you have witnesses that you're depending on are now saying something different in a civil deposition, oh my gosh, right? Also, when you're talking about a criminal investigation, that generally would come first, because if the civil investigation goes first, if the civil lawsuit goes first, the prosecutors are less likely to charge a case. Why? Because law enforcement and prosecutors don't want to be used as leverage in a civil case. So if there's
Can you explain that? What do you mean?
Well, for example, if there is an ongoing criminal investigation right now, and all of a sudden you see civil lawsuits filed, the law enforcement and prosecutors may look at that and say, okay, are we being used as leverage, that they're filing civil lawsuits and they're telling us what we want to hear so that we will put pressure on the defendants to settle.
Interesting.
And so, for example, I'm a private lawyer now,
Yeah.
and we have clients who come to us and say, we have a beef with this other company, take it to law enforcement, and we also want to sue. I said, well, if we sue first, when we take it to law enforcement, they're going to say, oh, you want us to join in here so that you have leverage in your civil lawsuit. No thanks. So you got to be careful on the timing.
And also, by the way, you and I both know that if there's pending litigation, if this goes to a trial, right? Again, we have no reason to suspect there's foul play at this point. We don't know of any suspects, but the DA has indicated, at least through Ben Crump, what Ben Crump has said, that this might go to a grand jury.
These are documented dynamics on the record from legal experts who follow these proceedings. The state medical examiner's findings have not yet been publicly released as of this video. Toxicology results are pending. There is a red discoloration noted on the back of Nolan's head that two forensic experts have interpreted differently. One view is that it resulted from post-mortem decomposition in water. The other is that it could represent blunt force trauma sustained before death, because the body does not bruise in that way after death has occurred. Both interpretations are medically documented possibilities. Neither has been confirmed.
They are going above and beyond to try to get as conclusive answers as possible. But when you have a drowning, yeah, it's possible. They're saying it's inconclusive because right now there's no signs of blunt force trauma. There's no lacerations on the skin.
There's the red discoloration on the back of the head.
They're going to have to explain that, what that could be. But
This is, by the way, I say that, but this is according to the medical examiner, the pathologist that was hired by the family.
the family hired a medical examiner, their own, and that medical examiner did a good job because he said it's inconclusive, right? You could have hired someone who just with a preordained outcome in mind. But instead he said, no, you can't. And it looks like just the easiest answer is the correct answer here, which is, and I'm going to wait until the reports come out, but right now it looks like an accidental drowning. And it's tragic, but I don't have any evidence of foul play.
So just to push back on this for 1 second. I spoke to a couple medical examiners about this. First of all, they all say the work of Dr. Mitchell was great. But it could be two different things. One could be from decomposition, the red disc, or it could actually be a blunt force injury of some kind because the body won't bruise like that after death. So two different ways to look at it. Now, I want to jump on something you just said. Even if it was accidental drowning, and I talked about yesterday, there's reports that he might have been heavily intoxicated. No one saw anything? All those people. No one saw anything, no one helped to jump in. That's the part that I'm stuck on.
Isn't it just as crazy to have all those people there and not one person sees an attack, an act of physical violence against someone who apparently was popular amongst the whole group? Not one video, no one has alleged a thing.
Unless law enforcement has all that information, then they're just not releasing it yet. Unless they're like, we have multiple statements about an attack. We have multiple people who saw Nolan drowning. But would they release it now to try to quiet the hysteria? Or they say, look, we can't yet because the investigation's going on.
That's where I say, in a case like this, when there's so many conspiracy theories, that they should be more transparent.
Sure.
But the fact is that people can't keep secrets, right? Mark Twain said 2 people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. Mm-hmm. If this were the case, if people had seen something, you'd think that it would have gotten out. So it looks like that he drowned in an area where people weren't looking or no one noticed it, sadly. But if there was an attack, violence, where it's multiple combatant action, yes, someone would have seen, heard something, even recorded it. That to me makes it impossible that that actually happened. That's why I think that there was an accident.
When the state autopsy and toxicology results are released, that discoloration will be one of the most scrutinized findings in the entire case. It may resolve the question. It may not. There is a thread in this case that remains genuinely unresolved and worth following closely. It involves the question of what the phone data will show. The subpoenas targeting platform records are specifically designed to determine whether videos or photographs from that day were deleted, and if so, when and from which accounts. That data is recoverable. Metadata stored in cloud systems does not disappear the way a local file does. If deletions occurred, the record of them exists. If the content was never deleted, that will be documented too. Whatever that data shows will either support or significantly undercut the theories that have been circulating for weeks. That is the next major development to watch in this case, and this channel will be covering it in depth when those findings become part of the public or legal record. What we know, documented and verified, is this. A young man died on a remote island. The cause of his death has not been officially determined. The people who were with him have cooperated with law enforcement and denied wrongdoing. An independent autopsy found the evidence inconclusive. A civil legal process is now underway that may compel the release of information the criminal investigation has not yet made public. And at least one person who has been publicly named in online spaces has received FBI-investigated death threats based on claims that are not supported by any documented evidence. This case is not finished. The forensic record is not complete. The legal process is not complete. And what is being said loudest online is not what is best supported by the documented record. If you have followed this case closely and you think there is a detail in the verified public record that deserves more scrutiny than it is getting, put it in the comments. Not a theory, not something you heard, something sourced. That is the conversation worth having. Follow this channel for the next update, which will cover the state autopsy and toxicology findings the moment they become part of the public record. The documented truth is coming. It just has not arrived yet.